when it comes to increasing profit, the first place everyone thinks you hear, all the time is going to be, well, just increase sales. We just got to sell more. And I literally couldn't disagree with that approach more. And I think it's actually most impacted by doing the exact opposite, which you laid up nicely, which is looking at expenses.
Got questions, we bring the facts. From proven pros who walk the tracks. Business life, no smoke, just flames. Ask the experts, David Williams brings the game.
All right, welcome everybody to another episode of Ask the Experts. And it's that time, February 20th at 10:30 a.m. We're coming at you from a very special place. If you look off to the left here, you'll see the Gulf of America. We're here in Cancun, Mexico, and we're excited to be coming at you from a tropical destination with some incredible guests today. You asked for it. We're delivering. We actually have one of the preferred accounting and tax strategist firms for insurance agents across the country, Club Capital. And today we have a powerhouse financial strategist joining us, someone who has been shaping businesses with expertise since his teenage years. Sutton Sabinash discovered his passion for accounting by just 16. By 21, he was already a CFO for a $100 million manufacturing company. And most can only dream of this. After a decade of running, successfully selling his own accounting and CFO advisory firm, Sutton took a brief break, diving back in here with Club Capital, helping businesses maximize their financial strategies. Sutton, welcome. And Antal, welcome to the show as well.
Thanks, Dave. This is the Sutton show here, so I'll shut up now and let him talk.
All right. Maybe we'll start with, give us a little bit of background and why, from your words, why this is so something you're so passionate about when it comes to helping business owners, and maybe one of the biggest needs you see out there that you're blessed to be able to fulfill when it comes to financial planning for insurance agents across the country.
Yeah, first off, what an intro. I've done podcasts and stuff before, and I don't think before an accounting talk I've ever had that hyped of like a lead-in, and then what an intro too. Thank you for the kind words. Mentioning my teenage years made my lower back hurt a little bit, but other than that, that was awesome. So yeah, to answer that amazing kickoff question, financials are fundamentally and foundationally the roadmap of growth to your company. It tells your entire picture of what you're doing day in and day out, from a sales kickoff, what are you bringing in the door to everything that's going out the door, right? Your input, your output. I'd argue there's nothing more important in business. Anatole might disagree from a sales perspective, but at the end of the day, your financials are everything. So I don't think there's anything more important to running an operation than knowing and being well versed within your numbers.
No, I love it. And I guess, when you look at business owners, because right now, it's maybe not the easiest time in the insurance space right now. I think everybody's looking for profit more than ever. Really, at the end of the day, I think, there's so many changes in the insurance industry. And when you look at a lot of the changes, they're cutting compensation, they're cutting commissions. It's making people look at the bottom line or think about the bottom line when they maybe really hadn't had to in the past more than ever. What recommendation do you have to insurance agents that are maybe in that spot where things are just tight and what they can do from a financial perspective to run their business effectively the way they need to, but still, prioritize some sort of profit when it comes to operating their business?
Absolutely. So, I think the first thing you do, I imagine it's no different than what you would do in your personal life, right? When compensations and things start getting cut, the first place to look is always really evaluating your wants as opposed to your needs, right? What are the things that actually need to operate efficiently? What are the things that are actually directly attributing to my ROI? And what are the things that perhaps today I just spend on because it's a business luxury and it's a product of, where things have been. And obviously there's a multitude, of levels to that. And there's, an endless stream of ways to go about doing that. But that's the first place to always look, is just a simple wants and needs comparison to your spending.
No, I love it. And I guess, why is it essential for insurance agents to regularly view their financial statements for what key insights they can gain? Because when I look at it, the average person I talk to, it's kind of like, we don't take a look at it until it's tax time. And then most people don't even take a look at it till tax time. It's like at the end of the extension on the last day of the extension, we're kind of like taking the look at it that we should have done 6 months ago. So why do you think it's essential for them to do that on a regular basis, monthly basis?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny being asked a question like that because obviously from, what I said to kick this off, right, is that your financials are a roadmap for where you're taking your company. So, it may sound cliche, but you don't look at a GPS when you get to where you're going, right? You look at it while you're going there. It's what's
Yep.
drawing you to that end destination. So to look at your financials after the fact or reactively, why, you're letting your business be in control of you at that point.
No, great. And how can an agent maybe use their profit and loss statement to identify growth or cost cutting measures? Because I know one of the things that you guys do a great job of delivering monthly P&L. So they literally know every 30 days that financial snapshot and they're more in tune with their businesses. But what would you say on that side?
Yeah. So, I mean, looking at your P&L, I mean, first and foremost, obviously it's important that you have somebody that you trust, categorizing things properly, right? Bookkeeping gets overlooked a lot of the time, but there's, I can't stress the importance of having accurate financials. So, once you're confident everything's bucketed where it needs to be, that's what actually provides you the opportunity to dive in to that kind of, that ROI analysis that I kind of alluded to earlier, or that, wants and needs type of review. If you can look at where you're spending, it's a lot easier, once you have it broken down to, oh, well, these are my, internet leads, this is my branding, and oh, this is my entertainment category, this is my meals category, and being able to really decipher a lot of those wants and needs.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I know it was a game changer in my own business, right? Because I think, we don't know what we don't know until we have to know it, right? And, I started going to masterminds and seeing all these different people that are starting to say, hey, I'm profiting X amount, because I think a lot of times the sexy thing to talk about is revenue, revenue, revenue. I had this much in sales. Well, how much did you earn off that revenue? Because I'd much rather have, a business that's going to throw off $1 million in profit that maybe has a lower sales. Like, hey, I did 3 million in sales, than some big flashy, hey, I did 30 million in sales, but I only took home $300,000 out of that 30 million, put out all this, output, but then the input wasn't this. And I think it was really when I started to shift my mentality, hey, profit first. I think you guys have probably well known that book and read that book, Profit First. Putting aside that profit and then operating off of the rest. And then even taking a look at each employee, because I think, and I'd love to hear your perspective on this, because I think you can look at your whole business holistically as a whole and look at the P&L, but it's like when you really start to dial into each individual component and treating it like its own subcategory, sub P&L, we would actually take our employees and then break a P&L down on them. Who is our most profitable team member, not the one that we think is the best team member based off of the revenue they're producing, because you might have a team member, hey, one's doing 50 units or items when it comes to insurance policy sold, another one's doing 40. You think the 50 item writer is way better than the one doing 40 because they're doing 20% more business. But then when you actually analyze it, that person's taking 5 times more leads.
Right.
That person maybe doesn't have the right positive mental attitude for your culture. Yep. So while they're an individual performer, they're not a team player performer. And then you break down all the individual expenses on that one employee, and you find out that, hey, actually the 40 item producer is far more profitable. What's your take when it really, you start to take a laser-like focus to incremental components of the business to inspect profitability?
Yeah. So, I mean, you hit on a key of, big, I'll say large points there. First and foremost, want to address that Profit First is the place that a lot of people go. It's obviously such a widely known, method or approach. I'm not the biggest fan of it. On the premise, it works well. I don't want to, spend a lot of time diving into that, but on the premise, if you're doing nothing, it's effective and it gets you moving in the right direction. But there's a lot of fluff in that as well that I think is living in your financials then, which you don't want to do. Living and dying by spreadsheets. When your personal or professional life is not what you want to do, and that's a lot of what that preaches. But to dive into that, you're spot on that when it comes to increasing profit. Very wrongfully, the first place everyone thinks you hear all the time is going to be, well, just increase sales. We just got to sell more. And I literally couldn't disagree with that approach more. And I think it's actually most impacted by doing the exact opposite, which you laid up nicely, which is looking at expenses. I actually am a huge proponent of not actually looking toward, hiring new people. Like, how can we kick off sales until you have just an unbelievable grasp on your expenses? Unless you know where every spend is going and that you're optimized from an expense, from an outgoing cash flow perspective, I don't think you're in a position to, really go into a hyper growth type of position or try to grow. Because once again, you're building kind of on a deck of cards then, right? It's like that game of Jenga. If you're not set with that foundation, that's why your P&L is built that way, right? With the expenses at the bottom, and kind of build your way up to revenue. I always believe that if you don't have, those first floors in order, you can't start building the penthouse, which is sales. Because if you have issues today, the more that you bring in, it's just going to amplify and accelerate, those holes that you have. And expenses, especially in this space specifically, anywhere between 40, 50, 60%, if not higher, depending on how you're managing it, is going to be employees. A very, heavy service-based industry, obviously. So there's no better place to start. It's where I start, with any sort of CFO consulting, is going to be, how is your staff performing? What is their current output? And as you mentioned, being able to break that down into a P&L for each individual employee is an amazing way. If you can get, to that level of data to track, is an amazing place to start. Because as you mentioned, not every policy is the exact same. So selling 40 to 50 doesn't necessarily mean the same thing. How many leads do you take in, so on and so forth. All of that, there's kind of endless variable on that. And then even within your firm, that's what makes Club Capital, if I do say so, such an amazing spot to work, is that, the background and knowledge of, hey, so, you may think that 30 policies a month is a big number for your staff member, but we see actually across the board that, on average, I'm just making up obviously random arbitrary figures, but, it's 45 a month. So actually, like, your entire staff is actually underperforming. Your best performer is a mid performer at, other agencies. And then that's where, especially from a CFO consulting perspective, you're almost operating as a business coach as well. You can kind of come in and, hey, how do we get your employees to that? Not that everyone has to be an A player, a top performer. That's never going to be the case, right? But setting a baseline of performance of each of your staff members, not just from what you believe they should do, but from an industry perspective, what we believe, how they should be able to perform. And then, kind of creating, and I don't like, cliche buzzwords, but once again, like, optimizing those expenses to make sure that every dollar that you're spending is bringing something back and bringing a number back that you're happy with. So not a little bit of a rant or tangent there, but you hit on a lot. So
no. I think that's great. Valuable information for sure. And I think a lot of people don't realize too, when they're coming up with like the incentivization plans for their employees, why not, think a little bit differently? Because I'll see too many offices where I'll look at, in the insurance industry specifically, they have a comp plan, but then they're paying out the same output on production A that they are on production B, when production A is way more profitable than production B. But to try to keep it simple, they just created this, blanket comp plan across the board. But what if you still had a simple comp plan, but then you incentivized your folks off of profitability? If you write more of business A that's twice as profitable for the agency, well, we can get you in alignment with our goals and maybe compensate you more on that particular business, or even give somebody, knowing that, hey, what is my acquisition cost? If you know your acquisition cost, and let's say it's $400 per household, well, now maybe you can bake in an additional incentive for your team members for an extra $50 or $100 if they bring in from their own marketing efforts or their own referrals or their own efforts new business that you didn't have to spend money on. Well, now you could cut down your cost of acquisition from $400 a household to $50 or $100 a household, and then give your team member that incentive at the same time to earn more money.
Yep.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a multitude of approaches when it comes to that. It's kind of how you want to slice it, but even just having that discussion, I think is really, it's a thought, changer, right? Of approach. And that's some of where, working with an accountant CFO is going to be, I think, eye-opening for a lot of not just agents, but business owners in general, right? It's just different ways of thinking about things that you wouldn't have done prior. As I mentioned earlier, it is kind of like that, type of business coach, right? Because we're very formulated in ways of doing things. And once we get in the habit, especially for tenured agents or, when you started, nobody knows everything about what they're getting into, yet we create habits and then, you kind of build on them, right? And when it comes to hiring, when it comes to firing, when it comes to ways of viewing financials, so on and so forth, just having, these type of discussions can really, and I'm just giving a generalized answer because it's obviously there's so many different ways that you can kind of take, those type of discussions and pieces of advice, but it just opens up a whole new world of thinking.
I actually have a quick question for you, Dave. You mentioned earlier that, you kind of shifted from maybe a growth, or maybe you had it all along, a profit mindset. In your agency experience, in your businesses, what was like the catalyst where you said, okay, I was focused on growth, but maybe I really do want to be focused on profit and have a bigger profit margin in my businesses versus growing at all costs?
Yeah, I think really what me was, one day it really quick. I think when you open up your business, you get the blinders on, you get hit with a fire hose, and you keep running down the same lane. And at some point, you have to pull yourself out of the business to look overhead and ask yourself the question: what was the real reason I got in the business to begin with? And then for me, it was freedom, the ability to impact people, and obviously, making profit. Not for the love of chasing money, but money is a great tool to do a lot of things and make a lot of things come to fruition that we're trying to. So when I understood that, started to look at, hey, you know what? Well, I'm the master of my own business. And when I leave, it kind of falls apart. So I got to re-engineer everything to the point where it runs and operates where I'm not here, which is kind of the practice that I took to every single company. But not only does it run and operate when I'm not there, so I can have the freedom and autonomy that I want to do more, to scale more, to impact more, but it has to be profitable. And I think when we start looking at that lens versus just blindly chasing sales, and you start breaking down to individual profitability and then looking every month, hey, where is the, additional waste? Where is the excess? And then how do I get more efficient? I started to look at things differently. Okay, we got maybe 20, 40 item producers, but what if I got my producers to 80 items and then we ran on 10 of them? Well, what does that mean to the bottom line? Well, if I have 20, 40 item producers, well, they all have a baked in base expense. They all have a baked in salary. So if I'm paying somebody $40K and then maybe they're making another $30K on the commission side and they're getting $70K for doing on an annual basis for 40 items. Well, if I do 80 items with that same person, I can recreate another one of those people without hiring a second person with a separate guaranteed base salary. So I'm on that second set of 40 items, I'm eliminating that $40,000 base. And now I'm just paying another $30K on top of that. So I can essentially replicate a great producer for another $30K if I can just get them doing more. And now what am I doing for that individual? Well, now instead of making $70K, they're making $100K, which is a vast difference from them. They're living in a better community. They're hitting more of their goals, getting to where they wanted to be. So when I started to do it, not only did I started to chase the right things that got me the right results, but I took my team members and made them first. If I can make them ultra successful and profitable and help them hit their goals and get them in a better place, and as a byproduct of that, my business is going to be more profitable than ever. It all comes down to, is this the best decision for the employee, the best decision for the customer, and the best decision for the company? And if it can check all those boxes when it comes to the profitability, looking at it that way, to me, that's it's a winning situation.
Yeah.
I like what you said there, David. And I think what's interesting in what you just mentioned, though, needs a little bit more, like, at least from our side of the table, because this is my issue with Profit First as a whole, is not everyone's business is in that, you have, I can tell, a very immense self-awareness, which is phenomenal. I argue there's nothing more important from a business owner is self-awareness of what you want, right? A lot of people don't necessarily have that. But what we do when we, start with any client, as any, great CFO should do, is is figure out what those end goals are, right? Like, what are you shooting for? Because, David, you mentioned like being a bit more tenured and wanting to move, like, oh, I'm looking at this, like, why did I get into this? Profit necessarily isn't the answer for, say, a scratch agent looking to maximize their VC, say, or something like that, in their first couple of years at Allstate, or, depending on what space you're in, right? So it's like, it's profit isn't actually the answer for everybody. It's depending on what chapter of your company in which you're in. If you're in a hyper growth mode,
absolutely, you might be in growth mode and you're just trying to put every dollar back in the business, which was probably the first 5 years of my company.
Exactly. Yep. And that's what I'm saying. And it's like, but there's still ways to optimize and do that efficiently. It's not just let's throw money at it. Let's just not profit because we're in hyper growth mode. But our end goal isn't to profit, isn't to have a maximized profit. It's to have maximized growth, right? So our spend is approaching it in that way. Whereas if you're in there 5, 10, 15 years and you look at it and go, hey, now I want consistent growth, but I want to be able to take X, Y, or Z home every month because I have a wife, a husband, some kids at home, this and that, I'm paying for this. That's where you kind of, your roadmap changes depending on what chapter of life you're in, what chapter of life your business is in. So there's no right or wrong answer to that. It's strictly based on that owner's vision, right? And yours is super curated to where, yes, profit and maximizing, while I'm sure keeping some level of growth, right? But then maximizing profit and finding that perfect equilibrium, was of the utmost importance to you. But not everyone's in that stage at every point in their journey, right? You weren't at that same stage in every point of your journey. And that's once again, where we're having someone to kind of rely on who you know your numbers to a T. I can already, in the way that you're describing it. But having somebody who can kind of navigate those waters based on what chapter you're in,
well, I think that's where you guys come in, right? And I say this all the time. I
Precisely.
think any important aspect of life, you need a good coach. I think in your relationships, you can't be ashamed to have a good therapist, a good coach when it comes
100%.
to that. If it in your faith, it doesn't hurt to have a good spiritual coach. When it comes to your business, having a great mentor there. When it comes to your finances, especially having a good coach. When you go to the gym and you're trying to get something done, what do? You hire a trainer to get the best result because they know the path of least resistance. But they're also going to keep, in the midst of the madness, they're going to keep you accountable to the mission and accountable to the goal. Right. And that's, what it sounds like you guys do a great job of, is because the reality of it is a lot of businesses out there, they're wearing so many hats. They're operating in the midst of the madness, in the midst of a mess sometimes. And then you guys can help them unwind the mess and at least keep them accountable to stay on track when it comes to their financial goals inside of their businesses.
1,000,000%. I would attribute it, to that of, it sounds funny because it's literally a desk role, right? But I would attribute it to very, very similar to a personal trainer, right? If you're not going to show up to the gym the 3, 4, 5 days a week, we're going to hit you with the same thing. Why'd you sign up? Like, why'd you be here? Because like, it's our time, it's your time. We want it to be, best utilized, right? So I think the accountability piece, is arguably just as, if not more important than the, guidance and strategy that we can provide, right? It's keeping you on that path, because I think as all of us go through life, right, whether, personal, professional, it's so easy to like, oh, like I'll start reviewing that next month. They're like, it's next Monday for the gym. I'll look at my profit here or start worrying about this. It's like to have somebody like, kind of flip that switch for you and say, no, like today we're not gonna play the next week card, the like next month card. Like we're gonna start working on this today. I want to hit these sales figures, but like, I'll start focusing on growth a little bit later. I just got to tread a little bit more. I got to figure this out. You kind of get into some of that.
And then you blink and your taxes are due. And then you
or yes. Yeah. You're basically going.
Then you file extension and you blink a second time and then your taxes are due.
Yep.
And that's precisely the reality of most business owners.
And we gravitate, we tend to gravitate towards what we like, right? And most insurance agents that I've met are really good and really like sales, and they gravitate towards that. And sometimes that gets neglected. The other part of the finances gets neglected. And so you talked about accountability and talked about the importance of that. That's why we're here, to make sure that the things get done that maybe you don't gravitate towards get done, so that you can improve your business by using those financials, right?
Well, and the thing I love too is like when somebody, sits down and works with you guys, I've seen it firsthand. It's like an eye-opening experience, and they see, hey, I'm putting in so much effort. I'm working like a dog day and night, and I make X amount. But there's a lot of case scenarios that they realized that, hey, there was waste here, there was waste here, there was waste here, there was a lack of planning here. And then, some of these business owners are so much waste that they could literally double their profitability without doubling the size of their business. Like you have a $10 million operation that took them 10 years to build. And the thought of doubling that is so daunting. But then when you analyze it from a low hanging fruit perspective, because they took their eye off the prize when it came to these things, they were maybe in the growth mode, to your point earlier, they're in that scratch position, but they had a tipping point. That scratch contract stopped. They went into a new contract when their book of business came to fruition. They have a $10 million book now, but there's still not the same slush fund that they had in that enhanced commission contract, but they're maybe still operating at the same level that they did in that stage one, when they're now in stage two of their business, and then wondering, hey, how do I make this even out? And it's just kind of looking at their business through a different lens, which you guys help them do.
Absolutely. I think my thought process with that always goes to, you brought up personal training earlier, it goes to being in shape. If you, every time that you want to lose weight, you constantly look at, oh crap, I got to run another 5 miles, or like, I'm not, I want to lose more weight, which means I got to double that and run 10 miles a day or this or that. And you realize that the most important thing all along was just your diet. It's the way that you approach it, right? It's the cart or the horse. And you're like, well, if you just ate 2,000 calories a day instead of 4, you wouldn't even have to run the initial 5 miles you're running every day. But if you get in that cycle where, like, if you don't know that, it's the cart or the horse, if you don't know that the diet's the most important thing, you can get overwhelmed by saying, well, even if I want to lose more weight, or if I want to put on more muscle, I got to sit in the gym for 5 hours instead of 3 hours. It's like, well, no, let's like refine what you're putting into your body to fuel it to get to where you're going. It's no different, with your finances and your business. Doubling in sales is the most daunting thought in the world. But ideally, like, I can look at any set of financials, right? And you look at revenue, and I can be like, in 10 seconds, you're not taking enough home if you're having financial trouble bringing this much money in, right? And then that's where you can. That's really where the fun really starts.
And I guess, what are some red flags that you see commonly when it comes to agents that they can watch out for on their financial statements, and what they can do to proactively address them?
Yeah, there's definitely a few big ones. So the two biggest expense categories are always going to be marketing, salaries. It's literally everything, right? Yep. So those are always the first two places to look. Our staff efficiency. More times than not, you're wasting money on staff based on their current performance. How that happens is the Band-Aid effect, right? You have an underperforming staff, and you're like, I got to do more sales. So you just, instead of refining and optimizing the staff and what you have, you go and hire more. And that's the same exact thing with leads. Same exact thing with SEO marketing. Instead of making sure that it's running to the utmost efficiency, it's the path of least resistance, right? You don't have to, when it comes to employees, you don't have to audit them. You don't have to have tough conversations. So let's just hire somebody else and fix the problem. I think it's another path of least resistance conversation, right? When, agents or business owners in general look at their expenses and go, well, if I can cut how much I went out to eat this year and how much I put into meals, and you're like, well, you could cut your entire meals, and if you literally improve your staff by 4%, you double up the impact. But it's a path of least resistance to just say, I'm not going to go out to eat as much. It's like, no, like, do the things you want to do. Let's look at the big elephants in the room, right? The conversations you don't want to have. And then the other thing that I see agents really get buried in is interest. I think a lot of it stems from not being able to make those decisions, but a lot of the time I see a lot of selfless agents, which is awesome, right? And a lot of business owners are actually a lot more selfless than people come to realize. But it's kind of put on your own oxygen mask first. I see a lot of credit card debt is a really big one, because, well, hey, I just need to float some cash, and I'll get around to it maybe when my bonus hits, top of the year or this or that, and before you know it, you're having hundreds of dollars, if not thousands of dollars of interest a month. And that once you start to get buried in that, it's not an industry that's insanely, profitable on the grand scheme of things, because of the service base, because of the marketing spend. There are certain limits, to like how much, you can take on in debt to where, you know, you, instead of looking at like a couple month fix, it can be a couple year fix. And it's one of those things that honestly, like it's popping into my head. If there's one piece of advice that I would, you know, give to any agent to start based on what I've seen, you know, looking at however many sets of financials, it would be, you know, really, really watch your non-asset based debt. It's probably the number one, you know, killer from taking home profit and being able to scale the way that people want to. It's insane how much not being on top of that winds up holding you back from where you actually want to go in the future. Because today it's helping you to float, but tomorrow it's going to be the thing that actually keeps you from making and having the freedom to make business decisions. Because I mean, 30% APR is insane. You know, it's
oh no, absolutely. And I see a lot of that too. It's like, you know, it's a lot of times when it gets to that point, it's the lack of getting comfortable with the main thing in your business. You know, because I'll see a lot of people come, they start an agency, but hey, maybe I'm not comfortable being an effective leader. I didn't have to do that in my prior role. Maybe I'm not comfortable with driving sales. I didn't do that in my private role. I'm going to ask my team members to do those things, but as a leader, I'm not comfortable. And I've always found people will do as you do before they do as you say. So don't fall into the trap like you're talking about, because what I'll see happen is they're not comfortable to live into the lane that they need to get the results that are going to drive profitability, like having that laser focus on sales, that laser focus on, you know, customer experience, all those different important things. If they're not living in that place in their business and the business is running them versus them running it, well, then it comes down to that point. Well, now the pressure is on and I want to relieve that pressure. The temporary blow off valve is getting a credit card. Well, you didn't fix the problem. You became an effective leader or an effective sales coach or an effective in there. So now all of a sudden you get yourself in a worse thing. Now the pressure doubles down on you. And at some point it becomes a hole too big to dig out of. But if you can have the forefront of that and, hey, get a little bit uncomfortable here because it's going to prevent you from getting a lot of bit uncomfortable later when you're in a bad financial detriment that you have to dig out of, that you could have mitigated all along. And, you know, that one of the things that kind of leads me to is, I guess, being proactive around this. How should an insurance agent, you know, approach their budgeting when it comes to critical components of, you know, of an active budget that you see out there?
Yeah. I mean, I say this and hopefully you know, in the best way possible. Budgeting, you know, budgeting for like like staying at a certain foundational level or even like a rudimentary level budgeting in this industry is fairly simple, if I do say so myself, right? Without, you know, the risk of sounding ignorant. It's not the most complex of business models. It's not manufacturing where you have, you know, 100 parts running on the floor with 10 components in each part. And, you know, you have 80 different suppliers and, you know, 10 different customers these places go. Like, it's a very consistent process, right? So it's kind of the KISS method at the end of the day when it comes to budgeting. It's keep it simple, stupid, you know, and like, not to say that rudely, but it should be empowering, right? Of, you know, this is how much I have coming in. Like, everyone gets their, you know, comp reports. I know how much is coming in every month. What am I spending, you know, on what am I spending on employees? What am I spending on, you know, my marketing?
Yep.
Am I profiting? Like, is that a positive number still at the bottom? Now, if I spend this, is it still a positive number at the bottom? If it's still a positive number at the bottom. And I'm just answering just in relation to not accumulating debt, right? And if the answer becomes no, just, you know, start. That's where that analyzing starts, right? Why am I not profiting? Like the way that y'all, the way that agents, I'm saying y'all, David, because you have, you know, your agency, but the way that this space runs really can be uber efficient, right? And I wouldn't overcomplicate it. You know, if something's not working, it's one of, you know, those really three main components. You make it enough, which you purchased, you know, an agency or you started an agency. So like you should know where those, you know, figures lie. It's built to profit, you know, the second in which you buy it. And then, or once you grow it, right? But yeah, from there, it's just, you know, and you can get as intricate as you want then. And that's where, you know, someone like us will come in. But like, as a starter point, that's, back in the napkin math can absolutely, be a serviceable starting point.
No, absolutely. What I'd love to dig in, because I know you guys have helped just a tremendous amount of agents, and I want you to think of maybe your top, one or two success stories where an agent came to you, and in that entire 180 experience that they started running their business in a different way, they started running their business more profitable, using their financial statements to make better decisions, to hire, to market, and expand their business. Do you have maybe a favorite success story or two that you could share, that this is where they are in the business? They came to talk to you, and after multiple coaching calls, they went from A to Z.
Absolutely. I love that question. I mean, on the same tone of what we're talking, I think one of my, favorites that we're working on right now is an agent who has a pretty decent size, well in the six figures of credit card debt, but has a sizable agency to show, that there was a lot of growth, in there. And when we first started working with them, I'm trying to, you got to be a little bit careful on, detail and stuff, but the long and short of it is, I'm never going to get out of this, right? Like, hey, this is just my business. And it was like, whoa, it doesn't like have to be that way. Like, you make this much money. It's kind of that same thing I mentioned, you make way too, your business brings in way too much for you to be in this situation. And through, I would say, almost like a coaching approach, right? I've brought that up a few times. Like, money psychology is the biggest thing. Like, everyone has their own money psychology. And at the end of the day, if you hear the word money and you feel good, bad, or like it's you're wrong. David, you mentioned earlier, money is just a tool. And this individual's relationship with money was that of it was a very poor relationship with it. Like, I'm just buried. I'm just, this is what it is. Like, I just want to run. I want to make sure my staff's, someday I'll exit and I'll, pay this off. And it's like, whoa, like, doesn't, that does not have to be that way. Like, you can, and I'm dumbing it down, but there was a handful of tough kind of conversations of how that individual's background impacted the way that they approach their business today, their upbringing and family, to, why they feel this way about, like, well, just, like, this is the way it goes. Sometimes you just got to take it on, and, this is my path. And yeah, I'm probably telling too much about the story, but it was really this kind of journey of rebuilding, not only a plan to rid them of debt, but really to rid the way that they feel towards money, that they feel towards their life, honestly. You brought up therapy and stuff. A lot of the time, money is one of the biggest drivers of people's personality types and things like that. And you can tell this is why I nerd out over accounting, but I could talk about that specific for days of why that makes our job so exciting. But you have an opportunity to really curate, and make a real impact on people. And the long and short of it is, it went from, a situation that I think, I don't think I can say with all, with all the certainty, right, that it would have never been fixed. And I think with even any other, any mid, decent level account, like maybe, a 5 to 10 year plan, we have a 16th month plan to be, rid of debt at this point. And depending on, certain fixes now and excitement, from the agent, even of like bonus spends and things like that, like, well, hey, I was going to use it for this. Maybe like, we have we have an entire operating plan that, if he doesn't take this, and, we've kind of incentivized and gamified it, that we could almost get it done in 11 months, which is unbelievable. And he obviously has a size agency to do it, but ideally, that kind of comes with the spend and the debt. But that would be, one of, I think, the biggest like excitements and home runs that I've seen or been a part of. And you just asked for two, but the a second that I can think of is David, you mentioned earlier, like wanting to have your income be more passive. Everyone's at different chapters in their career. Have an agent who is working literally probably 12, 13, 14 hours, even on weekends. They had acquired an agency a few years back, and it didn't go the way in which they were hoping. Like they never got out in front of it, right? It just kept kind of being a rat race per se. And I always find that to be another misconception of entrepreneurship, right? Is people think that like, well, you go into that and like you make a ton of money and you don't work a lot, you hire staff, and like quite literally it's more than not the exact opposite on both accounts. You work more than the average person, and you traditionally take home less. Like, you see the examples of success stories in entrepreneurship and assume that that's how it runs for everybody. And unfortunately, that's not the case. And, for a specific agent, it was that to an extreme. And it was very much like, why do I still do this? Like, I'm literally like at my wit's end. Should I just, sell and go back, to the golden handcuffs of a 9-to-5, right? I mean, for majority of people, that's the right answer, and especially when you're kind of feeling down and out, right? And within 7 months, we restructured. Same thing. Your business is bringing in X. We've got to pull you back. Like, it was a very inefficient staff. It was overspending on marketing. Stop me if you've heard it before, right? And within a 6-7 month window, we got it to where they're working 15 to 20 hours a week. And that's by choice. We've hired, an office manager that has stepped, one of the employees we promoted, I should say, to office manager, who was their top, leading performer, made some hires and things like that. And her, ultimate goal is to really have it be completely passive, very family orientated, and wants to just, have it really be just something that she can pass down, or sell and give, to the funds to her kids someday. And but wants to spend the time with her kids today. So it's kind of like finding that, she was insanely self-aware. And, from somebody like our position, that's okay, cool. You gave me the end destination. Now let's reverse engineer that and create the roadmap for where you want to go. So from like a personal life impact, those are usually going to be the stories that we like tell, right? Like making a company a ton of money and having somebody be like, yeah, I was able to go buy this car, and stuff like that. It's like, all right, cool. But it's the ones where you can genuinely see somebody's life being tremendously changed and the trajectory of their life changing, and their personality on calls then flipping from the first time you met them and having it, those are always going to be the most impactful. Hopefully that wasn't too long-winded.
No, that was great. I love that. And, I think we were talking about, just a little bit earlier there, the psychology of money. And I do think, there's a ton of truth in that too, that, while, one person A might have a great relationship with money, but then person B, like you bring that up, they've had such a negative experience. It's almost like PTSD when you have the conversation. Oh, yeah. And I think when people get to that place, they're almost in a place of paralysis, or even, feel a little bit ashamed to come out to ask for help, I guess. So that one person that's maybe sitting there in a setback financially today, that's listening to this, what do you recommend to them to, I guess, breathe a little bit easier and take that first step when engaging somebody like you guys at Club Capital that can, I guess, quote unquote, they can ask for help?
I think it's just making the call. It's sending the email, right? It's the same thing of, I probably get it a little bit wrong, but what's that like? It's that old thing of, if you want to exercise, just put your shoes next to the bed. Like, take that first step, right? Yeah. Putting your shoes next to the bed, and then the next day just put them on, and the next day just take a step outside, and before you know it, you're kind of in that flow. The first thing is just making the call, sending the email, and it's not an overnight thing. Some people are a lot quicker to gravitate to it. Some people have a little bit longer path to building that trust, building that not only with us as their accountants, but sometimes just their trust that they can do it. So everyone's path is a little bit different, but hopefully it's answering your question to just say the first and most important step is always just having the wherewithal to just pick up the phone or send the email, right?
If I can jump in there for a second, Sutton. Yeah. I mean, the amount of times I get on a call and someone says, I'm so embarrassed. This is the situation that I'm in. I haven't done my taxes for 2 years. I don't have financials for the last 3 years. There's no reason to be embarrassed, right? It's you're looking to grow, you're looking to improve. We see it all the time. We get on these calls and there's no reason to be embarrassed. It's just like, okay, then let's fix it. It's not a big deal. And so, to Sutton, your point, like, the first step is just raising your hand and say, hey, I need some help. There's no reason to be embarrassed. That there's no reason to put it off. It's just taking action and taking the first step.
Absolutely. I think it's important too to really. I'm not, we've talked a lot on people that are necessarily like maybe like going through it. It's also very highly effective for people that are that believe that they're running optimized too. And I don't want to like discount that as well. Like some of the agents that I've, and Anatole and I've actually had numerous conversations on it. Some of like the biggest success stories come from agents that think that they were doing everything right. And like, why would I need your help? Why would that, like, I'm running, I'm like, I'm running as optimized as I can. And I've been doing this for 15 years. And like, why would I, spend the money, have the expense on somebody like y'all? Like I'm already good. And like, trust me, I'll never like, if you're good and you're happy, like, listen, like, why would you want to grow? Why would you want to profit more? If you're taking it home, like, who am I to tell you different? Right. Like I'll never be the one to say, well, you could be doing X. If you're good, you're good. But a lot of the time it's, well, you would do better if you could, though, right? Well, yeah, but what are you guys gonna like? Well, take up the phone, like send an email. Like you'd be surprised, like what a good CFO can do for your company. And I think that's kind of one of those things too. Like you can be not to say this rudely, probably should phrase this better, but I'm a pretty straight shooter. Like you can be a big fish in a small pond and realize that like there's also ways of doing things that are like, in ways that you can financially approach your company that like work insanely well in other industries and also work insanely well in yours. Just because you're a big fish in this pond, it doesn't mean that you're also running the best that you can. So like those are some pretty fun ones as well, because if you already have a lot figured out, then we can come in and just work on, you've already got the first 20 floors. Now we can build, the Sears Tower and build the Empire State Building. Like that's, it's some of the big success stories that come from people that thought that they didn't need us either, because they were good and didn't have like a need or a concern or a worry. So just want to point out,
I think, the value there is, that person that's maybe doing things better than most at the end of the day, they're still living in their own world with their blinders on, and you're still having to focus on many different things. And if you look at from a financial perspective and then even a tax perspective that really haven't got ended in this call, we're going to get into in another call with you guys. So everybody listening, stay tuned for that one as well, because we're going to give you some ninja tax tips on one of the next calls that are going to be here. And then you look at the IRS code book and it's like this thick. You can't possibly know everything. And if you have the right expert yourself, the way I look at it, if you got the right expert like yourselves in their corner, like the right expert doesn't cost you money, because I mean, you guys can speak to it. How easy is it to find like just one idea, one strategy that pays for your services?
Oh, I mean, it is actually quantifiable. I was gonna say hard to quantify, but you can literally quantify it. It's one of the more fun parts of our job.
It's probably one of the best investments that they get actually made. I mean, they're out there buying leads, trying to get a lifetime value at XYZ.
Yeah, you actually can directly see an ROI.
If you look at a return on investment from somebody spending what they spend with you guys, with how affordable that you are, I look at that, it's like that should be one of your biggest returns on investments ever when you combine the financial planning along with the tax. And I'm not going to get too much into that. And I know you guys can't talk about it today until we get one of your tax professionals in the call. But I'll give you an example. What I did, I started going out there to business masterminds and seeing people not pay taxes. And I'm like, what is this? How are business owners not paying taxes? And then realized they're curing all this real estate, doing these different strategies. So before I know it, I'm putting, I acquired a $10 million real estate portfolio and did a cost segmentation on every single one of those properties and found $2.2 million worth of write-offs that I was able to use as now a real estate professional that I'm designated as, because I spend enough time in that business to be designated as a real estate professional, get the tax advantages of it in my income, and then created $2.2 million in write-offs from my real estate that erased income in my other business. Realized I wasn't putting enough in my retirement account, and I was eligible for a SEP, and I was able to take $58,000 a year, put away in tax-free retirement that I could put away. 179 plan where all of a sudden, boom, I'm buying a vehicle anyways, but if I get it of a certain weight and I'm using it for business use, even though I'm taking a loan on that vehicle, it's a $79,000 vehicle. Well, there's another $79,000 tax write-off. And then we even got like down to the point where I started getting so into tax strategy that, hey, we were looking to grow a business and grow an independent insurance agency. I'm like, hey, why do it ourselves? Why put our energy into ourselves? Found this guy that was running out of cash, like the person earlier that you were talking about, that didn't have, a lot of cash flow for their business. This person was in there, but they were writing $2 million in premium a month. So they were selling off half their premium a month and there was no market for it. So they're having trouble finding it. We went to a bank and said, hey, we'd like to finance this. They said no. We're like, okay, we'll buy the first chunk with our money. Once we see a good performa on it, then would you consider it? They said yes. So what we ended up doing is said, hey, plug your entire team into our operation, write $1 million in premium a month in there. We'll give you a 2.5 multiple on it. We're going to use bank money now. Once we got approved by the bank, they give us a $6 million line of credit, put 25% of our own money down, put 75% of the bank money down, treat it as ordinary income in terms of the payments over to him, paying him for marketing expenses, for employees, for consulting, growing our business $1 million in revenue at a guaranteed multiple rate. We're only paying if they play and they give us the return. And then that was another, $2.4 million tax deduction that took our taxes down to zero in one of our best income years ever.
It's awesome.
Like, taking it to the next level, I know that you guys help people do, because it's now, hey, the financial planning, I'm more profitable than ever. But what we'll talk about in one of the next calls is, hey, imagine if you had the two engines running side by side, right? And you got the financial planning down, and then you're going after the low-hanging fruit that so many people don't go after. What can I do from a tax strategy? Because the IRS code book is there for a reason, to leverage it within the guidance of the law, because they literally give you a pathway, just most people don't understand it, to pay nothing in taxes if you played your cards right.
Yeah. And I think like you've obviously like are describing, like once you're tenured, right? I just don't want that. I love that. Phenomenal.
Yeah, not everybody's at that point.
I just don't want, I just don't want, because like,
point.
even as you're saying it, like even to me, it's like, oh, this sounds like a lot. It's a lot, right? And like, it doesn't start there. It gets to that point, right? And like, you can be as involved or not involved, as you wish. I just, want to make it palatable, right? And I also, think what's, so interesting about what you describe is important to mention here, that like, we don't, you pay a salespeople commission based on performance, right?
Yep.
Point blank. A lot of tax firms, I've obviously been doing this my entire life. I partnered with dozens of tax firms in my life. A lot of tax firms do charge you based on what they save you. Not something that we do here. I've been wanting for, over 10 years of my life now to try to figure out how to get financial accounting to do the same thing. Cause man, I would love those dividend checks of like saved you X, and like, I'm just the best value out there, I guess. But with, and Anatole can speak to that too. Like from a pricing perspective, it's not something that we do. But I've never seen it in financial accounting, but a lot of time on the tax side too, you wind up paying, a percentage of savings as well. Which if you're saving $50,000 a year, $100,000 a year and paying, 10% or whatever, it's like, hey, well, I'll pay whatever, right? Because I wasn't going to get it if we weren't working together. But that's another benefit here that I just wanted to kind of mention, because you talked about that like ROI. That's just another variable on the tax side. That's not that's Anatole or I's area, but yeah, it's another benefit here that I see that you're not going to get across the board, especially with higher tiered performance type firms. So.
Oh no, absolutely. No, this has been an incredible episode so far. And as we're winding down, I mean, you guys have just given a wealth of knowledge around things that I don't think are talked about anywhere near enough. Because when you look at low-hanging fruit in a business, I think this is one of the quickest ways to really turn things around when it comes to what you're taking home from profitability. First starting with the awareness. You don't, basically anything that you don't measure, like you're not going to get the end result that you're looking for at the end of the day. So what you guys really do a great job of is helping them inspect what they expect, give them a form of measurement, kind of get them in alignment, and then, help them understand what they don't know. Because again, that tax code is this thick, and there could be a million and different strategies that not everything applies to everybody, but there could be something in there they didn't realize that applied to them, whether it's a tax credit of some sort, whether it's an incentive of some sort that, that they're missing, or it's multiple little things that they're missing that all add up together. And as we're kind of winding down, if you could summarize like one final, I guess, word of wisdom or one final piece of advice for anybody that's out there that could be the single biggest point of value to them, what would that one piece of advice be?
After a 57-minute conversation of talking, getting it down to one sentence, David, that's awesome. I'd probably finish where I started, which is your financials are the foundation of your company, and you either control them or they control, or it controls you.
Know your numbers. Yeah.
Yeah.
Know your numbers.
No, I love that. And then let's talk about a little bit about what is it like to work with you guys. We can spend a few minutes on that. Like somebody coming to you, what does it look like from day one? How does that evolution go where it becomes better and better? Because the buck doesn't just stop there with day one. Hey, we contracted with Club Capital and now we're done. But over time, they're going to get more sophisticated alongside you guys and get more in tune with their numbers. So what does that journey look like?
Anatole, feel free to.
Yeah, I can probably take this one. So, Dave, a lot of people think day one their problems are going to be solved. I want to set that expectation here and say, no, that's not the case, right? It's a journey that we're taking together, not dissimilar to the analogy that we used earlier with the personal trainer. We see a lot of excitement the first month, but it's the consistency that's going to yield results where it's really going to pay dividends in month 6, 12, 18, and beyond. When someone comes to us, the first thing that we're going to do is get their financials in order. And then once those financials are in order, that's when we can start meeting with them from a consulting perspective, understanding what their goals are, understanding what they're trying to do, and then build upon that to really grow their business. If it's growth that they're focused on, profit that they're focused on, whatever it is. But the first things we got to do, get the financials in order, understand what they're trying to do from a business perspective, and then we can help them implement a plan to execute upon whatever that end goal might be.
No, absolutely. Absolutely love it. And then being experts that are in the insurance field specifically, why does that matter? Because I know the majority of your clients, you're not limited to just insurance. You work with a lot of different business, but a good chunk of your clients are in insurance. Yep. And then we're in a group of 8,200 members here in the insurance syndicate that are all insurance agency owners. So I guess why does that specific expertise matter?
I'll give kind of a silly example, and then maybe Sutton can dig in deeper. But I was on a call with someone, and they told me that they were a $10 million agency in revenue. And I said, okay, let's take a look at the books. They had $10 million in premium. That was a bad day for that agent. They just they didn't understand, because their accountant didn't understand, premium is not revenue. This was an independent agent. So I had to have that conversation, and all of a sudden they thought they had a $10 million business. They had closer to a $1 million business, right? And so that person had been working with their accountant for years. And so somehow that bookkeeper didn't know the difference. And that's a crazy example, right? Not going to happen all the time, but we've noticed sometimes people are recognizing premium as revenue. And that can really screw with the book values, that can screw with your headspace, that you just don't understand. So the nuances in insurance, the recurring revenue pieces, it's really helped us provide a better service to our clients by speaking their language, understanding how they get paid, understanding who the players are in the space, and being able to provide better service in that aspect.
No, I love it. Love it. And I guess last but not least, how do people reach out to you guys? How do they follow you? How do they start working with you?
Yeah. You can find us on the web, obviously club.capital. I think Andy dropped our link in the chat right now. If you want to set up some time to talk, feel free to email me directly, anatole@club.capital. I'll also be posting in the insurance syndicate group from time to time here, just with some value additive stuff. Talked about tax tips, talked about some of the value additive things that Sutton was saying. I'll try and recap that in a post as well. And so, look for me in the group. Email me at anatole@club.capital, or feel free to visit club.capital and schedule a consultation there.
No, that's great. That's great. And anybody that's listening, whether you're listening to this live or you're listening to the rerun of this, Club Capital is our preferred sponsor in the Insurance Syndicate Group. And what that means is we thoroughly vet any preferred sponsor. We put our stamp of approval on, and we've watched them. We've known them from a number of years. We've been at events with them. We've been sponsors where our vendor tables were literally side by side and know these guys. These guys stand for integrity. They do what's right, and what's right isn't always what's easy. They got their game together. I'll tell you, I've worked with so many different accounting, so many different firms out there that just don't have their act together. And it's almost like they need a financial advisory firm to run their own accounting firm. But that's not the case that you're going to see here at Club Capital. And then specifically, if you're working with an accountant that's not like familiar with your business, that's kind of like going out, again, the personal trainer analogy. You're going out there and hiring a personal trainer that is helping you become a bodybuilder that has never became a bodybuilder before. They might know how to get you in better shape than where you were. But if you're trying to be Mr. Olympia, you probably want to go out and get a very niche trainer that's actually gone on that journey. Well, they've gone on that journey with not just hundreds, but thousands of insurance agents across the country over the years. So, I'll give my personal testimonial and stamp of approval on Club Capital. They run a class act and they put their money where their mouth is. Just, get on a call with them. It's free. And it could be the very thing that you need to alleviate that anxious feeling that's getting in the way from you falling back in love with your business again and getting it to run exactly the way you want it. So make sure, drop a lot of love in the chat for them. Again, if you're watching it live or you're watching the rerun, and then, reach out for a free consultation, because you never know, they could help take your business to the next level. And then this has been another episode of Ask the Experts. And we're going to be excited for our next week, where we're going to bring in another expert, same time, same destination in the Insurance Syndicate Group. But until then, we'll see you next week.